Welcome back to the New York Times Close-Up. Joining us now, our friend Christopher Cerf. He and Henry Beard have written the definitive book for those who want to succeed in business and politics without really lying. Spinglish, the definitive dictionary of deliberately deceptive language, should grace each of our desks as handy reference. It's just been published by the Blue Rider Press imprint of Penguin Random House, the definitive dictionary of deliberately deceptive language, a must-read dictionary. Why can't we just say what we mean anymore? Whatever happened to tell it like it is?
Well, tell it like it isn't is really the motto that we go by here. And I think it's really a product of the fact that politics is on the internet or on the 24-hour news cycle every day now. People get caught doing things and have to cover up. And of course, marketing people have always used this kind of language, but they're getting better and better at it. And ordinary people are beginning to use it. Business is using it more than ever. For example, nobody gets fired anymore. They get recruited, or they get offered a career change opportunity.
Or downsized.
Well, that's, if you're the CEO of a company and your company failed, you say you had negative growth. You never say you had losses. But you may have to recruit your entire staff. But then you say you right-sized your company, and you, as a CEO, you might get a raise for that.
That's true. Just as the Army never retreats, they make strategic withdrawals.
Absolutely right.
And you point out this is really an old thing, as you say. Maybe Edward Bernays, the PR man, started this when he had women demanding equal rights, and they were carrying lucky strikes and called them torches of freedom.
That's one of the great PR strokes of all time, and he did many things like that.
It's really amazing. You can't even call this a self-help book, because that in itself becomes an oxymoron.
Well, yes.
We don't fire any people anymore, and we don't really talk about death anymore either. We have so many euphemisms for death, for morticians.
Well, one of the terms that I love came from a police department in a town out west where they talked about delifing somebody rather than killing them. Yes.
Now,
a person was delifed.
Chris, you have almost 100 pages of notes at the end of this book. Are all of these references really for real?
Absolutely. That's part of the fun of it and also the horror of it. And I think we can say we were both amused and horrified by a lot of the things we found.
I'll bet you were. How did you find them? Did you actually cull them from newspapers, books, magazines?
Well, yes, that was certainly one way. We looked up all the scandals, of course. That was a great place to start, to see what people had said so they didn't have to admit things. The famous example, of course, is President Clinton talking about the meaning of is. Mm-hmm. And of course, he was technically right. He wasn't having an affair at the time that he said that. So is was the wrong word to use.
Do people have affairs anymore?
No, they don't. They hike the Appalachian Trail. At least that's what you do if you're Governor Sanford of South Carolina. And he said that, as you may recall, when he disappeared from the State House for 6 days mysteriously. And he said he had been hiking the Appalachian Trail. It soon turned out that he was having an affair with his mistress in Argentina. And the term hiking the Appalachian Trail has now entered the language as a synonym, really, for adultery.
Now, this is something that George Orwell certainly understood very well. He was being satirical, but it turns out that he, in many ways, was right.
Well, we're being satirical, too, and I think we're right as well. But he concentrated mainly on politics and society and politics. We see this as something that's very much in politics, but it's become part of business. It's become part of the way ordinary people talk. For example, if you are goofing off at work now, you could say you were zero tasking, and it sounds very impressive, right?
It does.
It's much better than saying you're sleeping at your desk.
Is this something that's unique to English, or does this go on in all sorts of languages?
Oh, I'm sure it goes on in every language. But English is interesting, as Henry, my colleague, often points out, because we have two really separate languages or streams of languages that join to form English, Anglo-Saxon kind of words and also Latin words. Latin phrases sound very polished, so if you want to cover something up, it's good to use a Latin phrase. You could say that you're augmenting reality instead of lying. On the other hand, if you want to make something sound worse than it is, which is another kind of spin, then you can use an Anglo-Saxon phrase.
And you point out this is different from slang or jargon, too.
Well, slang really has nothing to do with this, so there can be slang that is also spin. Jargon sometimes is spin when you're using it either to sound more important than you really are or to cover something up. Right-sizing is a good example of jargon. That's a business term that we used before, but it sounds a lot better than the company went broke and I have to lay everybody off.
And some of it, as you point out in the book, becomes very pointed. When Frank Luntz, the political consultant, comes up with a term like death tax, that catches on and really develops a meaning and a constituency that becomes very potent.
Oh, a lot of this is brilliant stuff. I mean, some of it is just ridiculous, but some is very clever. Frank Luntz, I probably don't agree with everything he feels, but he's an absolute genius, I think. Death tax was a great term because it really makes it seem like you're being taxed just for dying. The Democrats tried calling it a wealth tax, you know, which makes it sound like if you're really rich, why not?
Who could be?
But that didn't catch on. Death tax is a better term.
And in the book, you point out this goes well beyond George Orwell and Edward Bernays. Manifest destiny meant kind of wiping out the Indians.
Well, sure, but it sounds impressive, doesn't it? I mean, our destiny, what else were we going to do? We had to do it.
One of my favorites in the book is for your convenience.
Right, which means for our convenience. A company would say, for your convenience, you'll have to stand outside in the rain while we enjoy our lunch break, for example.
I once saw a store closed at LaGuardia Airport, one of those airport stores, and they had a big sign on it that said, to serve you better, we're closing this store.
Well, that's right.
Amazing. Wildlife management.
Well, that's hunting or killing lots of animals anyway, but doesn't that sound economically, you're an economic steward or an environmental steward if you use that term.
And how would you define in the book an anomaly?
Anomaly is a term that's used to cover up accidents. In fact, the Challenger disaster was called an anomaly. 3 Mile Island, which wasn't quite a disaster but could have been, was called an anomaly. It's just some weird little thing that happens. So we have a picture of the Titanic during its anomaly back in 1912. We have a picture of that in the book.
And let me ask you one last one. If one were embarking on a journey of self-discovery, what would they be doing?
Well, probably you're unemployed, but it's a really great way of saying it.
It's like being a consultant.
Yes, well, a consultant is obviously unemployed.
Christopher Cerf with Henry Beard, Spinglish, the definitive dictionary of deliberately deceptive language. It's just been published by Blue Rider Press, an imprint of Penguin Random House. And coming up next, from spinning words to spinning in the air, meet a couple in love from nytimes.com.